I'm Doug, your tech service representative for Atlantic British, and in this video we're going to introduce you to the brake fluid and hose kit that we make as part of our Repair and Maintenance Academy. The hose kit will cover both front and rear hoses for your Discovery 2, 1999 to 2002, and what's included is your 2 front hoses, 2 rear hoses from body to axle, and then axle to rear caliper. You get new bolts for the caliper banjo fittings with new copper washers, seals, and enough brake fluid to properly flush out and bleed the whole system. Now, the advantage behind our brake hoses as opposed to original equipment design, we manufacture them here. They are manufactured of a braided stainless steel. It makes them lighter, stronger, and much more longer lasting. Now, if your vehicle has 100,000 miles, 105,000, which Land Rover actually recommends replacement of those hoses at 105,000. This is kit I, part number ABP218SKA, and this will get you everything that you have here. These hoses will be considerably stronger and will last longer than the original equipment, which is going to make that safer, and in the long run is going to make your brakes perform better. In a few minutes we'll show you how to install these on your vehicle. In this video we're going to show you the fundamentals and give you some tech tips on replacing the brake hoses in your Land Rover. Now, in this video we're going to use the Discovery 2, which is from our we'll use the kit from our Repair and Maintenance Academy, which would be ABP218 SKA. As you'll see listed here, and again, you can download and make copies of this sheet that will give you all your maintenance requirements and recommendations for your Discovery. Now, as we showed you in the introduction, we have the hoses, brake fluid, new banjo fittings with gaskets, and of course all packaged together in one envelope. We'll start with the front. Now, essentially, if you know you're going to be changing over the brake hoses, one of the first tips I'll give you is start actually a week ahead of time and start shooting down all of the connections on your hoses with penetrating oil. This will give it some time to work its way in. You may want to do it several times over the course of a week. In the long run, it'll make your job a lot easier. On the top of the brake hose, where it attaches to this support bracket, the hose itself, its fitting, has 2 flats in it which will help lock it into place. So the first thing you're going to want to do is break that top nut loose. And the majority of these nuts on the Land Rovers, they'll use an 11mm, or you can use a 7/16. I prefer a flare wrench only because it gives you a 6-point fit all the way around the nut. It's less distortion on the nut and you have a better shot at breaking it loose without damaging any threads. And essentially you're just going to drop that right over the top, and you'll work it back and forth just little bits at a time, and it'll take a while to break loose. You can actually feel this one now start to move. Be patient with it, because you definitely don't want to break that brake line or take the nut out. And you can actually hear it now with the nut moving on the line. And you're just going to keep working that back and forth until it finally breaks loose. Again, be patient, give it some time. If it feels still a little stiff, throw a little more penetrating oil on it, and then give it 4 or 5 minutes to seat in. But you can actually hear the nut pop on the line, and that's telling you that you got some looseness, and you're just going to keep working that back and forth. Once you have that loose and disconnected, and you've taken that line off, you have a retainer clip on the bracket there. And before we go any further on this, probably easiest just to move your line. This is your wire for your wheel speed sensor, and these are just grommets that pop into the brackets, and I find moving them right out of the way will reduce the chance of damaging that wire, because you have a similar clip here and here that holds the line in place. Usually the easiest way to get those out, a pair of water pump pliers, and just grab around both sides of that tab, and again just work it back and forth, and it'll break loose and pull out. That's what that clip looks like. Now you want to save that clip. Now in some cases where these can be rotted, if it is and it's weak, you want to get a replacement, because you definitely want to have that new hose held in place. So again, you're going to do the same thing here. You're going to put the pliers on that same fitting. You're going to work it back and forth. You'll take that out. You have your nut off. That would have this end of your brake hose off. And you can see where this sits in place in the bracket. They freeze in place pretty good, and that's all that's holding that is rust. You give that a few taps with a small hammer and work that out, and that'll eventually break loose. And then last but not least, on the side of the caliper, there's nothing but a banjo fitting. This is simply take this out like a bolt. Break that loose, back that off. You're going to clean both sides of the surfaces. You want to make sure that on the caliper side that stays nice and clean. And of course with your kit, you're going to have a new hose, a new bolt, and then 2 new copper washers. And again, it's very important, make sure all the surfaces are clean when you put it back together, and lock it down. Doesn't require a great amount of force to torque it in place, just a good snug in place. You're going to put your hose back up in, where it'll essentially look like this. You match your bend on the bottom for your banjo fitting. That'll lay up in the bracket there, and this will sit up in here. Now again, you'll see a big difference between our hose and the original hose. The original being a rubber hose with an inner liner, and then of course a spring around the outside to help protect it. Ours being stainless steel, doesn't require as much thickness, still does a better job. Plus you have the fact where on some brake hoses, because of the rubber, they can break down internally and they can actually clog or become restricted, and that won't happen with a stainless steel. So that essentially lays out the front hose. Now we'll take you around to the back. Okay, so now we're at the rear wheel, and you're going to see the similarities, or it's going to be basically the same setup as you had with the front. Essentially just breaking down to align with a nut fitting here. You'd want to pre-soak that with penetrating oil, give it a little time, let it work its way in, work it back and forth just as we did with the front. Again, you can pop the wire out for your wheel speed sensor to move that out of the way. You're going to need to take it off the brackets anyway. And if you want, you can save these yellow brackets. You can see where this is nothing more than basically a pinch attachment. You lift this upper tab, you can pull the center out, and then this bracket will come off. And these will attach around the new one. They'll sit a little loose, but all they're for is just to hold the wheel speed wire out of place so that it doesn't rub up against the tire. Keep it clear of any obstructions. And then at the bottom, you're going to have the same thing you had up front. You have a banjo fitting with 2 copper gaskets. You're going to remove that nut, take that area out, clean the surface, put the new hose in place, attach your nut up top, put your slide brackets back in. And again, keep an eye on any of your retainer tabs, retainer brackets. Anything rotted or in poor condition, you should change those over as well. Now we're going to show you the 2 small hoses that are replaced up front that come with the kit. They're a little difficult to get at, but I'll show you how to get at them. So last but not least are the 2 small hoses. Now these actually connect your rear brake hose line that runs from the rear wheels up along the frame on the driver's side and runs up to the same bracket that supports the left front brake hose. This brake hose you're going to change the same way we showed you on the right front. Remove your wire out of the way, remove your yellow clamps. On this bracket in particular, and the way this is designed, you have a fitting on both ends of these 2 small hoses. Thing is, the 2 inners are held behind this bracket. The only way to really get at them is to remove this bracket, which is really nothing more than just drilling out these 2 rivets, and then when you go to reattach it, you're going to just use a pair of 1/4 nuts and bolts, and you can nut and bolt this right back on, because you can reach on the back side here when you go to put your nut back on. Once you actually have this drilled out, brake lines are very malleable. In other words, very bendable. They're designed to do that. So you can actually grab this bracket, push forward and out enough where you can get a wrench on the upside on that fitting. And again, soak them down with penetrating oil, let them sit for a little while, let it do its magic, break the line loose. You just keep working it back and forth. These are a little difficult to get at, and they're going to take some patience, but you can tell by their positioning that over a period of time they are going to dry rot, they're going to get tired. So this is actually an ideal place to use a stainless steel line, which is definitely more resistant to abrasion and to wear out. And you can see they're going to fit just right. So again, there's the basics on changing your brake hose. Probably a good weekend project. And then of course, when all said and done, you're going to bleed the brakes out both front and rear. Now is a good time to do the brake flush. You'll be given enough fluid where you can actually do a complete flush through your brake fluid, and you'll be good for another 100,000 miles. Okay, so at this point now, we've replaced our hoses, we have them all in place. Now we need to get the air out of the system. We have essentially two tools I can show you, whether you do have an air compressor or not. If you're fortunate enough you have an air compressor or you have a shop, we have a tool that you can use to extract brake fluid through the system. You're simply going to go up, fill your master cylinder. You can come down. You're normally going to start at the wheel furthest from the master cylinder, which is normally your right rear, and then work your way closer. Because we have our lights already set up, I'll show you essentially what you would need to do. Most cases, you're going to have a rubber boot, which will protect and keep garbage from building up inside the bleeder. Again, I like to use a flare wrench for breaking that loose. It takes a little bit less effort, less distortion on it. Crack that loose. And if you got the system is empty, you can crack the line loose, let the system gravity bleed until you see fluid come in through the bleeder. Tighten that up. And this tool, which we have listed on our catalog, is W7010. Actually has a nice rubber end on it that will pop right over the bleeder. You plug your compressed air into the back, and then all you simply have to do is pull the trigger, and as the air passes through, it creates a vacuum in the bottle which will draw brake fluid in. And because you have a translucent hose, you'll be able to see when you no longer have any air bubbles in there. When you're done, just simply disconnect, lock this down, and go on to the next wheel. If by chance you're doing this in your driveway, don't have access to an air compressor, we do have a little tool, W155, and this is nothing more than just a small bottle with a clear line, a couple different tips and adapters so you can hook up to your bleeder. And then this one you would just put in a small amount of brake fluid in the bottom of the bottle, go up top, pump the brakes several times until you have filled the bottle up. By that point you pretty much have most of your air bled out, and just simply do that one wheel at a time. Once you have your brakes bled out, put your wheels back on, make sure to torque the proper specs, take your jack stands out, and you're ready to go. So again, when you're ready to change over your brake hoses, give a call to any of our knowledgeable salesmen at 1-800-533-2210.